Tonight the front door resists me. The brass knob refuses the full turn. The deadbolt is half-wedged, stubborn, its teeth curled outward like an accusatory grin. My fingers leave smudged crescents because the spare key is still warm. Yet the porch light pulses as if waiting to see who betrays the silence this time. Why would someone leave the lock unsettled like a dare? The porch light hums softly, steady as an old clock, and the wind chimes over the railing barely stir. My hand presses again to the brass knob, feeling the familiar warmth near the base where the handprint sits from nights like this. Nights when I'm the last one home, and the house accepts that. The lock sighs open with the same reluctant click as always, and I step onto the tile, the soles of my sneakers whispering against the dust that settles in the crevices. Inside, the hall smells of lavender detergent and the faint tang of coffee gone cold in the pot. Shoes line up politely by the rack, a silent choreography of departure times. I flick on the overhead light. The bulbs hiss, then spill the usual pale glow across the rug. The kitchen clock ticks, rhythm steady, 20 past midnight. The kettle is already half filled from earlier, the handle still damp where my sister's hand met mine while I was leaving. I set the bag down and, without thinking, run a thumb along the banister, habitual, grounding, before sliding the deadbolt back into place, exhaling as I hear it settle with the familiar, inevitable clunk. Lila stepped back from the island the second he walked through the door, the warm smell of curry she'd been saving for herself catching in her throat. Damon didn't bother with a greeting. He set his keys down with a thunk, the metal rattling across the wood, and his eyes flicked to the notebook she had opened on the counter. "You listened to the whole thing again?" he asked, voice low, but his fingers curled around the kettle like he wanted something to grip. "I listened," Lila said, voice rising just enough to catch his attention. "You said you were keeping me safe. You said your job was to make sure I never spun out. That was the beginning, wasn't it? The dinners, the late-night mending of my code, the praise when I followed the rules. All of it was care." He scoffed, a dry sound. "Care doesn't mean you owe me anything." She leaned across the counter and shoved the notebook toward him. Pages were dog-eared, sentences circled in red ink. "You called it protection. You admitted it." The words pressed against his fingers when he touched the paper, the pen still warm from her grip. Damon's jaw tightened. "You were scared on your own. His voice cracked, then steadied when he took a slow breath. "I kept that open door for you. You knew I could lock it." Every muscle in Lila's face pulled taut as she grabbed the kettle and poured hot water down the sink's drain. Steam hissed, a small victory that fogged the air. "You used what I needed as a handle. That wasn't protection." Her hand trembled, not with fear, but with pressure. "Trust isn't a lever." He took a step forward, but she stepped back, hand hovering over the drawer where she had already stuffed her keys, a pack of her own. "I'm not staying to see how far you can push it." He reached for the notebook and didn't touch it, instead resting his fingers on the counter, eyes fixed on hers. "So what now?" he asked, the first note of vulnerability in the room. "Now I stop letting care be the reason I take instructions," Lila said sharply, then turned without waiting for his response. The door clicked shut behind her with a definitive finality as the hallway light went dark. In the silence that followed, Damon stood with the notebook between his hands, the confession she'd dragged out of him echoing in the concrete evidence he now stared at without touching the pages again. Nina clicked the recorder on, eyes flicking up when Lila craned her neck over the table. Coffee steamed beside a stack of notebooks. Lila slid the first transcript across the laminate surface. Her finger traced the line where Damon had promised, Open door, always. Before asking for the keys back and the grocery list for the week. He started with bringing soup, Lila said. Then every text after that was about where I was, who I spoke to, how long the door stayed ajar. Nina didn't look away. She tapped a pen where the notes on the page ended in a question mark. The door opened, spilling sunlight and a rush of air with Kira's shoulders. You wanted the second walkthrough? Kira picked up a second recorder from the shelf and set it beside Nina's. Lila pointed to the next folder. Kira's transcripts bore the same patterns. Together, they hit play. Damon's voice, warm at first, ended with a dry note about keeping someone's schedule so they don't drift. Kira changed the subject, slid a hand over her mouth and said, I gave him rides to the pharmacy and he started telling me when I could leave work. The recording repeated that line, and Nina scribbled as Kira paced the small room, her back to the wall. While Kira described when Damon began tracking her sleep, Nina snapped 2 images of the notes, one for the publication, one for the investigator. We can cross-reference times, Nina said, and the room perked with urgency. Lila pulled a fresh page from her binder and wrote, boundary log, in block letters. She added the times he'd texted lunch reminders while she was on her break, the ones that ended with, call me if you step outside the neighborhood. Her phone buzzed on the table. Damon's name flashed. Lila's hand hovered over the screen for a second too long. Nina looked up. Do you want to take it? She asked. Lila let her thumb swipe the call to voicemail. Damon's voice seeped through the speaker, breathing unchanged, saying he was just checking in, because I care. He mentioned the notes about staying put, the good status when she texted back, the frayed one when she didn't. Lila's fingers curled. She forced them to stay flat on the table. When he said, you know where my door is, the room stiffened around her. She lifted the phone, glared at the screen, then dropped it face down, the screen flashing red with missed call. Kira leaned against the wall, eyes closed for one beat, then opened them and said, he called me before you came, asking if I'd been allowed to talk. Lila flipped her binder shut, leaving a stack of pages that now listed not just times, but the moments he'd shown up unannounced, bringing groceries, then questions, then rules. We'll get the rest of the transcripts, Nina said, and handed Lila an envelope stamped with another interview slot. Lila took it, sliding it into the pocket of her bag, the action calm but decisive. She stood, shoulders squared, and walked toward the door with Nina just behind. The stairwell was warm. The voicemail indicator on her phone pulsed once, then stayed dark. She pressed the button to delete it, the screen going blank as nearby footsteps echoed their departure. Leaving the room filled with the static of recorded voices and the settled knowledge that the dependency they'd traced was no simple choice. Lila pushes through the community center door, the rush of air turning the paper cup of coffee half into skin. She leaves the cup on the counter, walks straight to the corner table where Nina is already stacking transcripts and a recorder. Marisol's finger taps rhythmically on her phone. She keeps glancing at the lobby camera feed projected on the wall. He lifts a hand, palm facing out, like he expects her to wave back. Lila doesn't move. Instead, she slides the recorder closer to the edge of the table as if setting a trap. After an uncomfortable minute, the guard lowers his voice. Sir, you're not welcome. This is private property. The pounding stops. Damon leaves, but not before planting his face near the glass, watching. Lila's fingers finally loosen, but not enough to pick up the coffee. The tension crackles in the silence between her, Nina, and Marisol. Then Nina exhales, snatches up a pen, and scribbles a new note. Locked door. No contact unless we choose. Nina leans forward. He's still calling it care. He says he has the door unlocked, but he doesn't say what happens if we bolt. That's why we answer, why we nod when he ties his schedule to ours. Lila drops her pencil, the noise startling Marisol. She grabs her phone and scrolls past the message from yesterday. Same tone, same request. Leaving means eviction, missing rent, missing work, maybe no references, she says. Gaze fixed on the floor where a single sunbeam cuts across the spilled coffee stain. It's easier to keep him convinced than to fight the rocket he's got aimed at everything that pays the bills. Marisol sets her phone down beside the recorder. Then we do the thing we can do. She slides over a printed email from the legal aid clinic, the subject line glowing. Pro bono intake, Lila Danvers. They'll take the transcripts. They'll file for the tenant protections. We don't have to answer him tonight. We tell him, if he texts, that we're with our attorney and they handle scheduling. Lila takes the email, reads it aloud, the words tasting like a new weight. I'm keeping the door for now because walking out means he snaps the lease and the landlord will listen, she says. I leave the line open so we still sleep, so I can still pay for this room. The words hang in the air and hit like a clap of thunder. Nina nods. Marisol reaches over, taps the recorder. That's the truth, she says to the device, then to them. We can't pretend otherwise, but we can control how slowly we step away. The payoff comes in 3 steps. Nina hits send on the intake email. Marisol prints an updated statement that lists Damon's presence at the door. Lila walks to the kitchen sink and finally pours the coffee down the drain. Watching the liquid spiral away with a calm deliberation, she refuses to let the intruders see. The scene ends with them huddled over the laptop, drafting the statement for legal aid, each keystroke a small release of pressure. Carmen thumps the binder shut every few sentences, eyes flicking between tabs as Lila lays the newest transcripts atop the coffee table. He spelled it out, Nina says, tapping her own copy where Damon mentions the open door that turns into a lock when he wants compliance. Carmen absorbs the page, then pops her lips. This isn't about a one-off mistake. It's a strategy. Vulnerability becomes leverage the moment he ties care to surveillance. She slaps a sticky note on the timeline, the phrase weaponization of trust written in thick ballpoint. We'll fold that language into the petition. The judge needs to see the pattern, that name-calling, the expectation of reports, the way he frames distance as betrayal when you resist. Marisol leans forward, palms flat on the table. So this letter to him, she says. It isn't a warning. It's a boundary backed by the fact that he's been moving the goalposts with every kind word. Carmen nods, already typing. And the letter makes clear any future contact must go through me. Nothing else. If he crosses it, we file for contempt. This isn't hope. It's documented rules. Carmen hands over the drafted notice. Sign here. Initial the paragraph about the recorded confession. We attach the clip and the timeline to prove the weaponization claim. By the time I file, the court sees he uses care as currency. Lila leans back, ink bleeding across the volunteer sheet as she signs. She presses the pen harder on the bullet where Damon states, I'm still on your side, but don't forget the lock. Nina's leg jitters under the chair. She breathes out through her nose before scribbling her name. We have a concrete chain now, Marisol says, thumb running the edge of the binder. He can't say it was all a misunderstanding. We've got dates, calls, the surveillance push. That's our answer for every, I'm only trying to help, he throws at us. Carmen nods, standing. I'll send the letter this afternoon. Set up the hearing request. You walk away today knowing the story in court is that he weaponized trust. That's the truth you present. They walk out of the office carrying the binder between them. Security has parked a guard at the crosswalk ahead. Damon stands across the avenue, a hand cupped around his mouth as if calling out. His eyes lock on them the moment he sees the legal badge on Carmen's visitor pass flapping on Marisol's tote. He doesn't move, but the guard steps in front of them, saying, "He can stay there. He can't pass." Damon lifts his other hand, palm facing them for a beat, then drops the hand and turns his head toward the skyline. Nina's shoulders drop and rise with a tight breath. Marisol grips the binder tighter, then slides it under her arm. "We just signed the paper," she says, voice steady but low. "He can't twist this anymore." Carmen gives them a nod, the guard already reaching for his radio. The guard radios in, and the tension loosens by inches. They cross the street together, clutching the binder like a shield, and when Carmen texts the confirmation receipt, letter filed, next hearing scheduled, the relief in the buzz of her phone feels earned. The conference room smelled like cold coffee and printer toner. Monica leaned forward with her tablet, clicking play on the latest interview, while Nina scrolled through the transcript on the laptop between them. Kira's face filled the screen, pale, shoulders curved inward, eyes darting to the left, where Damon had once loomed during collar checks. "I don't trust him," she said, gaze flicking toward the window. "I do the paperwork because if I don't answer, he gets loud, and I dust off the script again to keep him calm. That's how I stay safe right now, acting like I believe in the bond, when I'm only pretending." She paused, swallowing hard before continuing. "Every text I send is a calculation. I keep my replies short because the more I open up, the more he circles back with reminders that he's the only one who notices me." Jordan shoves the latest binder into Lila's hands before anyone can protest. "The judge needs this before 4, he says, tapping a red stamp that lands with a satisfying thud on the new transcript. Lila slides the pages across the table, pointing to the margin where Kira's words now live next to Damon's timeline of surveillance. "Attach the timestamp from yesterday's security feed," she insists, and Nina leans in to underline the sentence about Damon demanding status reports. Monica finishes signing the affidavit in quick strokes, the pen scratching like a countdown. Jordan thumbs the form into the courier envelope, then lifts his gaze. "We'll submit it with the amended injunction," he says, handing it back. Small victory. The courthouse will see Damon's pattern described as weaponized trust, not just difficult behavior. The room exhales as the envelope closes. They step out with the courier just as the door hissed shut behind them. Security radios crackle. Aaron's voice says, "He's across the street again." Lila steps slow without her asking. Damon is standing by the traffic light, hands in his pockets, watching them cross. He raises his chin when they pass, calling, "Lila," before he can get any closer. Nina's hand lands on Lila's elbow, guiding her toward the curb. Damon lifts a folded envelope, palms open. "I just need you to hear me," he shouts, heaving the envelope toward her. Lila keeps her head down, but the car lights reflect off her face. She glances once, because she still remembers how his voice used to feel like a landing spot. She forces her shoulders to roll, flinches as if the old habit of turning and answering could still work, and then lets her foot carry her past Aaron's barrier. Aaron steps between them and reads from his pad. No contact except through counsel, every syllable deliberate. Damon grinds his teeth, then drops the envelope onto the sidewalk. Monica leans in, circling her phone, capturing the refusal. Damon stalks back a few steps, then retreats, melting into the crowd. No triumphant conversation, no, "I'm sorry," just evidence of another attempt to bypass the legal wall. Back at the apartment, Nina is already at the kitchen island, laptop glowing legal forms. Lila palms her phone. There are 2 new texts, both the same. "Open the door. You know I keep it open." Her thumb slides over the reply field. She hesitates, then taps the long press to forward. "Send to Jordan," she tells Nina without looking up, and the phone obliges, sending the text along with the timestamp. She flips the phone face down on the counter, then turns the page in the binder to the list of contacts and crosses his name out again. The craving to respond lingers between her fingers, but her hand goes instead to the recorder, toggling the playback of today's capture. The earlier anger pops with the sharpness of adrenaline, but this time it dissolves into the practical beat of documentation. Nina nods, eyes on the screen. "We build the file," she says, and the binder slams shut, echoing the finality they both feel. Lila allows herself a tiny nod in return. No one answered him, but they strengthened the walls around every door he tries to open. She pauses on the curb as the afternoon folds toward dusk. The binder of filmed compliance and recorded refusals rests in the hands of another woman who nods once and lets the door close behind her. Damon lingers across the street, his shadow long and still. Security stands between them with patient, unwavering arms, their badges catching the last of the sun. He cannot cross. She does not look back. The glass of the center catches her mingled breath and the setting light, and she feels the ache of a promise finally severed, the seam gone rotten and unstitched. There is no reaching in, no reopening. She steps away from the street, away from the thrumming need to answer, letting her feet carry her down a path that never curves toward him again.